You and I today are living in a world that loves hype. You see commercials on TV and you see these products that are really hyped and they're actually over and above what they could ever provide anybody. And in these TV commercials and things that are promoted, the louder and the bigger and the more colorful it is, the more interest and attraction it has. Businesses have been known to spend millions of dollars on ads and commercials just to try to get us to click on something to purchase something from them. And again, the more colorful, the louder it is, the more interest it gauges and the more you and I will spend. You see, this is, if you'll allow me to be honest with you this morning, this has even made its way into the church world. The church with the best branding and the best logo and the greatest lights and the best cameras and the greatest music and the more flamboyant the preacher and the skinnier the jeans are on stage, the better it is. You see, the more flamboyant the service is, the more hyped the service is today, the more attendance grows and the more online hits you get. And perhaps not because, I want you to hear my heart because I want to be very transparent with all of you and everybody watching online today. Not because it doesn't fill up, not because of the power of God that is available on that particular ministry, but because of the creativity of the marketing team of the church. If you have great photographers and great camera operators, you can get the right angles and you can have an empty church, but the right picture will make others think that it is a full church, when in reality, it's empty. All because, family, we love image in America. We love image, and we want to create a presence. Even the filters, man, you could be the ugliest person on Instagram, but with that filter, you are the hottest man alive. Come on, somebody. That's why my natural beauty will not allow filters on my Instagram account. You see, don't get me wrong, family. We want to attract people to our services on campus and online. And in fact, COVID has really caused every church to focus on their online presence. And don't get me wrong, we want churches full every week. But I wonder what heaven thinks when a church is full of people, not because of the Spirit's drawing, but rather because of the hype of the program that Sunday. I'm going to say that one more time for those of you who just got stuck. I wonder what heaven thinks. I wonder what God thinks when a church is full because of the hype of the program, not because of the power of God. I wonder what God thinks about that. Now, I also want to be clear that many of these things that I just talked about, whether they're lights or cameras or music, they are simply tools and methods to get people in the door so that they could in turn have an opportunity to get into an atmosphere of God's presence, because I'm a firm believer that God's presence is the difference that we need in our lives to have success, right? We need His presence, but we must be careful to make sure that we preach a gospel that attracts people to Christ and not just His church. I'm gonna say that one more time. This is good stuff. You gotta make sure that we preach a gospel from this pulpit. I need you to keep us on track as a person who comes to this church, that you make sure that you hear a message that attracts people to Jesus and not just His church. Now, let me unpack this a little bit more. Why would I say these things? Because I need everybody hearing me and everybody watching me online today to understand that God looks beyond the fluff into the heart. God looks beyond the hype and into the heart. We all know the story. If you were raised in Sunday school and you know the story of the Old Testament, you see that a king named Saul ruined his life, and God told the prophet Samuel, I want you to go look for and anoint the next king of Israel, and you're going to find him in the house of a man named Jesse. So Samuel goes, and he goes to Jesse's house, and he sees Jesse's sons, and they're all great, and they're tall, and they're big, and they're grandiose, and he's thinking, man, this is the one, and he gets to one of the guys named Eliab, and he's like, there is no doubt on my mind that Eliab is the next king of Israel. He's so good looking, he's He's tall. He's big. This is our leader. And watch what God says to him in 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. The Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. I'm so glad that God doesn't judge me based on how short I am. I'm glad that God doesn't judge me based on how chubby I am. I'm so glad that God measures the heart. God looks beyond the exterior and he looks at your heart. And when the Bible, family, teaches about the heart, it's speaking about a combination of your mind, your intellect, your will, your desires, and in reality, it could be called your soul, the heart. You see, your motives and your emotions come from your heart. This is the part of you that will live forever. And listen to me, both God and Satan are after your heart. They're after your heart. That's why the writer of Proverbs would have the boldness to say, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So guard it, protect your heart. Ladies, don't give your heart to the first guy that pays attention to you or clicks like on your Instagram or Facebook post. Be careful to give your heart away, man. Be careful to give your heart away to any floozy that likes you. Ooh, I just said floozy in church. Yes, I did. Because now I'm mad. Be careful who you give your heart to. Protect your heart. Don't give it away so easily. Why do I tell you that? Because the Lord speaks to the prophet Jeremiah and he says this, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve. Be careful when you say, I'm just following my heart, because your heart is deceitful. Be sure before following your heart, you weigh your motives. Because often, listen to me, often what feels right is simply an emotion and not a good decision. Well, I just like the way she makes me feel. Of course, because she's showing all her cleavage. Of course that's gonna make you feel good. If you didn't know this, you came to a real church, y'all, this morning. There's no religiosity here. Of course you're gonna feel that way. That doesn't mean you need to get with her. And so you need to be careful. You gotta test your heart. You gotta be careful before following your heart, because a lot of people make decisions based on hype and an emotion and not on a genuine commitment to be all in following Jesus. Now I want you to go with me. We're gonna read some things in the book of John chapter 6 that teach us about following Jesus and about the heart that he's really looking for, okay? Because when Jesus was here on earth for the 3.5 years that he was here, there were basically three kinds of people, or three groups of people that followed him at any one time. And I'm gonna give you these three things. There was the crowd, there was the core, and there was the faithful. The crowd, the core, and the faithful. And why do I say the faithful? Well, I was trying to find another C so it could be really nice and pretty, but I couldn't find one. So the crowd, the core, and the faithful. Every time Jesus was around, and every time Jesus moved and preached and went from city to city, there was always a crowd, there was always a core, and there was always faithful people around him. In John chapter 6, I'm gonna read the first 2 verses to you. It says this, sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him, watch this, because they saw the signs he performed by healing the sick. You see, when Jesus began to preach and teach, people were moved because he taught with authority. He taught differently than the Pharisees and the scribes and the teachers of the law. He was different because he taught with like, he had this boldness and he had this audacity and he had this love all mixed together and it drew people to him. But when he began to do miracles, that changed everything. It got attention. You see, at any one time, more than 500 people would follow Jesus everywhere he went. This was we could call the crowd. At times, this crowd could grow over to 5,000 people. You see, people would hear that the healer was coming. Rumors would spread that he healed lepers and blind people, and that he could even raise the dead. And rumors were spreading that this Jesus could be actually the Messiah, the Savior that the Jews were looking for. And so, of course, if there was a miracle, it was going to draw a crowd. I promise you that if somebody on a Sunday died and we raised them back to dead in this altar, I promise you there would be no room next Sunday here. Because people follow after signs. And so Jesus raising the dead and Jesus doing amazing things, it caused people to follow him. And so it would draw interest, but it's interesting that not only was it interest when he arrived at town, but people would actually leave their homes and they would follow him from town to town and village to village because they were interested in the things and the miracles and the signs that he would do. I think that some of them that were in this crowd even loved how Jesus would challenge the status quo of religion and the hypocrisy of religion and how he would break the spiritual rules of Judaism. I think they were like, yeah, that's why I don't go to church. Tell them, Jesus. And a lot of us are guilty of saying things like that. And so there was this crowd that they loved what Jesus was doing and they wanted to see what they would get from it as well. And in that crowd, family, there were skeptics. There were people who were curious about eternity, curious about whether or not he was the Messiah. There was people who were broken and rejected by society. And when Jesus would preach and teach and do miracles, they thought between themselves, maybe he would accept me. Everybody else has rejected me. Maybe he would accept me. You see, there were people that had been hurt by religion in that crowd. People who would say, I'll never step into a church. Religion is for other people. It's not for me. But Jesus gauged their interest. And so there were people there that would follow him temporarily. They followed Jesus based on what they could receive from him. They were interested, family, listen to me very clearly. They were interested in the show and in the hype. They perhaps would get a tug in their heart when Jesus was doing great things and even teaching, but there was an unwillingness by the crowd to really go all in and follow Jesus. You see, we could classify this crowd as the feel-good goosebump crowd, interested in a feeling but unchanged, never surrendered, and the moment that things get hard, they walk away. They followed healings but not the healer. They followed healings but not the healer. But make no mistake, even though there were cynics, and even though there were skeptics, and even though there were hurting and broken and rejected people in that group, make no mistake about it, Jesus knew every name. He knew every situation. He knew every broken heart and every fear and every hurt. He knew every story. He knew every excuse because he knew their hearts. You see, today I can look at the crowd and I can name several of you and I can know some of your stories, but I promise you, Jesus stands up here and he knows every name and every condition and every spirituality in your life. He knows it all. You see, we look at a crowd, Jesus looks at the crowd but sees the individual and the heart of the individual. So after the miracles that Jesus would do, then he would intentionally engage people with strong teaching that would cut to their hearts. And so in John 6, there's 5,000 men, which means there was probably a good 15 to 20,000 people there. And he has them sit down, and we know the story. He feeds them all with some fish and some bread, and there was even some left over afterwards. And he does this because he really cared. He cared to feed them physically, but more than that, he cared to feed them spiritually. And so he feeds them. And after doing the miracle, the Bible tells us and teaches us that he kind of goes away because they want to make him the Messiah. So he goes away, and that night the disciples decide to cross the river to go to the other side, and it's middle of the night, and Jesus decides to walk on water. I mean, how cool is that? He just decides like, yeah, I'm just going to walk over to them because I can do that. I created the laws of nature, so I can break the laws of nature. You know, and so now it's the next morning, and Jesus is in the synagogue, and the crowd shows up. And Jesus begins teaching some hard things. And then he says, man, whoever comes to me, I'll never cast out. I won't reject you if you come to me. And so those that were in this crowd, they speak out to Jesus and they say, our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness. And that's why they followed Moses, because Moses provided a sign to them that God was with them. And so watch what they say. What sign will you do for us so that we can follow you? What will you do for us to make it worth our time to follow you? What can you do to make me happy so that I can go to church more? Our ancestors ate manna, and that was a miracle, so that's why they believed. What are you going to do for us so that we believe? See, can I tell you that when we think about the crowd, they will always have a consumer mentality. What's in it for me? How can you bless me? And if I don't get blessed, then I don't need to go. If I don't receive what I want, then I don't need to be part. See, a crowd mentality is what can I get out of it, not what can I give to it. You see, there's a big difference there. And it's all a matter, family, of the heart. So Jesus tells them this in John 6, verse 35. Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. What he's telling them is, your forefathers ate manna in the wilderness to satisfy a physical need, to do a miracle, but eventually they died. But the bread that I'm gonna give to you will make sure that you will never die, that you will always live. The bread that I want to give to you will not only feed you here on earth, but it'll feed you into eternity. Come to me because you'll never go hungry. And they just couldn't get it. And family, it's just like today. There's out of this group here, there's probably 200 and some people here this morning. Not everybody is going to receive what the Lord wants to give to them today. I've been doing this long enough to know that in every Sunday service, there's a people who are part of the crowd they want to consume. I'm gonna come at you with a heart of a pastor this morning, okay? So if you get offended, I love you. Okay, just know that I love you. The church is not about you. Church is not about me. The songs that we sing aren't about us. They're about him. And somehow we believe the lie to think that church should be about us and our preferences and what we want. And it never was about that to begin with. When Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will never prevail against it, he said, I'm gonna build my church and my church is gonna be about me and my kingdom, not about if I can satisfy what they want. That comes through something else, which leads me to the next group of people that follow Jesus. We could call them and classify them the core. I'm almost done, I promise. Out of the 500 that followed Jesus regularly, Jesus chose 72 to be his disciples. We believe that Jesus only had 12 disciples, but in fact, Jesus had 72 disciples. Men who would go out, in fact, some of them were women, and they would prepare towns for his coming. We could call really these 72 his hype men. They would go into a town before Jesus would arrive to that town, and they would tell people, get ready, Jesus is coming. And in Luke 10, we read that Jesus even used them. Now the core, they were more committed than the crowd. They made a decision to leave everything to follow Jesus. They adjusted their lives, and they followed Jesus a little bit more closely. They were the group of disciples that we don't hear too much about, except for Luke. And so in Luke 72, Jesus called these 72 guys and he laid hands on them and he said, I empower and delegate my authority to you. And I want you to go out into cities and I want you to lay hands on the sick and I want you to heal them. And I want you to preach that my kingdom has come near to them. And I want you to get them ready for my coming. And so he blesses them, and 2 by 2, they go all over Israel to go and preach that the kingdom of heaven has come near, and to go lay hands on the sick and the sick would be healed. And after some time, these 72 come back. You see, here's the thing is, these 72 people that we would classify the core, these are people that they love to be used by God to do great things. They love the feeling of helping others because after all, it feels good to help people. Can I get an amen? It feels good to bless somebody that needs blessing, right? And they want to be part, listen to me, they want to be part of a move of God as long as they agree with it. They want to be part of something as long as they agree with that something. And that was these group of 72. They did. They loved Jesus. There's no doubt about it. And Jesus uses them, and they do some really great things, and they come back to him and they said, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And we did great things. And Jesus looks at them and says, guys, I tell you what, I saw Satan fall like lightning when you were out there. I mean, you were tearing his kingdom apart. And they're like, yeah, because it feels good when you pray for somebody and God heals them. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's really cool that when you can pray for somebody and God blesses them, or you give a word of knowledge and the person says, oh man, how did you know that? That was right. It kind of feels good and almost like makes you want to puff your collar up a little bit, like, I got it like that. I'm prophetic. See these hands? When they start shaking, God's moving, right? When my right leg starts doing this, watch out, right side, because you're going to get it. Whop, right? And there's people like that. There's crazy people like that. And Jesus said, hey guys, I saw Satan fall like lightning. This is in Luke chapter 10, all right? And he says, understand that I've given you authority to do as I do. But let me tell you something, guys. He says, don't get excited that you did great things. Get excited that I've written your names in my book. Amen. Like, get excited about the fact that I've changed your life. It's okay that I use you, but don't fall in love with being used before you fall in love with me. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people in the core that fall in love with serving, but they're not in love with Jesus. Because here Jesus is teaching these 72 guys about heart and humility. He says, you've had success, that's great. It's awesome to see somebody healed and to know that God has used you to bless somebody, but don't allow pride to steal that from you. Don't allow pride to corrupt that spiritual power, because you have to come from an identity of being a son before you can be used as a son. You don't have to work for this. You don't have to hustle for it. It's a natural overflow of your relationship with me. If you abide in me and I abide in you, ask what you want and it's yours. I will give you power. But it all starts with relationship. And so these 72 now are with Jesus in the synagogue, and Jesus is teaching about bread and being the bread of life. And watch this. He says this in John 6, verse 54. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. Wow. All right, hold on a second. Eat your flesh and drink your blood? Come again? What? See, Jesus says difficult things to gauge the heart. Because you know, the real you comes out not when you're good and happy. The real you comes out when you're mad. Wow, you got nervous. It like got nervous in here. I think I heard crickets. Is the real us comes out when things aren't good. And so Jesus then begins to say something kind of difficult. And he's not literally teaching them that they're going to have to eat his flesh and drink his blood. He's talking about spiritual things. He's saying that if you want to follow me, then I'm going to have to be on the inside of your heart and influence every aspect of your life. The way that your blood touches every organ, my spirit needs to touch every part of you. And this is eternal life. If you're going to follow me, then I need you to be all in. That's what he's telling them. You see, again, there's the crowd that's hearing it. There's the 72 that we could call the core. And then there was also the 12 guys that we know as the disciples that are the faithful. Now, these 12 disciples, they're the inner circle of the 72. These were the guys that slept next to Jesus every day. They helped him organize events. They absolutely fell in love with him, and they left everything behind to follow Jesus. And man, were these guys messed up. I mean, they would be part of Restore City today. They were rough. They were broken. They were hurting, but when they were called and they heard Jesus' voice, something inside of them was rocked. Something inside of them changed, and they followed Jesus not because of the miracles or the signs, but because Jesus had changed their hearts. Jesus told them some very difficult things, and they didn't allow themselves to get offended. They felt the heartbeat of Jesus. They saw him moved with compassion for the lost. They took his mission, understood it was going to be their mission, and they understood that Jesus was mandating that they release heaven on earth. You see, family, there's not much difference between the 12 and the 72, except for one major thing. And I'll close with this. One of the problems in church today is that we can often confuse serving with relationship. We can confuse church attendance with spirituality. We can be at church and we can help people outside of church. We can even be in leadership or ministry positions. We can be in church every Sunday, and on the exterior that looks great, but there's no true development of spirituality and maturity in the heart. There's no true development of relationship with Jesus. And if that's the case, and you're working and you're serving and you're in church every Sunday, but you haven't taken time to develop a heart for him, then these are all empty works. Because the crowd, listen to me, the crowd followed to see what they could get. The core followed to see what they could do, but the 12 followed because of love. The crowd was there to see what they could receive. The core was there to see what they could do next, but the 12 just simply wanted to be. And as Jesus continues his teaching about flesh and blood, I want you to watch what happens, because here it gets a little bit deeper. Caitlin, you can come up to the keys. All right, I'm going to read John 6, verse 60. All right, if you have your phones, grab it. If you have your Bible, grab it. Watch this. I'm going to be reading out of the NIV version. John 6. Now remember, he's in the synagogue. The crowd is around. The 72 are there, and so are the 12. On hearing this, many of his disciples said, "This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it?" Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, now watch, the crowd isn't grumbling, the disciples are. Jesus said to them, "Does this offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe." He's talking to disciples, family. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him. He went on to say, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them." And look at verse 66. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. Isn't it interesting that this verse is John 6:66? The number of man, the number of the flesh. You see, 666 is not the number of the devil, it's the number of us. It's the number of man. It's us acting in our flesh. From this time forward, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. And then he turns around, he says, "You do not want to leave too, do you?" Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God." When Jesus taught about eating his flesh and drinking his blood, the disciples, the 72, were like, "Hey, yo, this is hard teaching. Are you serious?" And they're not grasping the spiritual connotations of the teaching. Understanding that Jesus was saying, if you aren't willing to serve me with everything that you have and let me into your heart, you're not really following me. You're following signs, you're following people, and that's why you get hurt so much by the church, because you follow people and you don't follow me. America is full of people who are hurting because the church hurt them, but they allowed the church to hurt them because their eyes were on the church and not on God. Because I promise, baby, over the last 20 years, my wife and I have been hurt by many people in this church, but our eyes are not on people, they are on God. And so Jesus says, Are you offended by this teaching? Are you gonna walk away because I'm asking for a little bit more from you? Have you not felt my heartbeat these last few years? Have I not used you to do some pretty great things? Have I not given you great gifts and blessed you while you've used this gifts? This offends you for reals? Are you serious right now? That I'm asking you to give me just a little bit more of who you are and you're offended that I ask for more? Do you not realize the life that I have given to you? Do you not remember how I took you out of addiction, how I gave you purpose, how I took you out of a broken marriage and out of a broken divorce, and I restored you and I gave you brand new things? Do you not remember everything I've done for you? And because somebody in the church hurt you, you've turned around and you've walked away? Or because I've asked for more of your heart, you don't want to give it to me? Really, this offends you? He says, my spirit and my words are life, and your flesh will do nothing for you. Everything that I've talked to you about is about spirit, and you still don't want to believe. You don't want to go all in. You don't want to go all in, but family, I'm here to prophesy to you and tell you that your relationship with the Lord has to be more than hype. It's got to be more than lights and a show and a chubby preacher on a Sunday. It's got to be more than that. I will offend you if I haven't done it yet. I will. Who are you serving? Who will you follow? Jesus said, really, you guys are gonna walk away? And that verse hit me so hard this week. It says, from that point on, many of his disciples, not the crowd, Jesus expected the crowd to be superficial. He expected them to just come based on what they could receive. He could expect that. He knew what to expect from that group of people, but from the 72, the ones that he used, the one that he was closest to, he said, wow, you're offended, and your offense is causing you to walk away. We got to let go of offense. We got to let go of that hurt. It's real. I'm not telling you to get over it. I hate when people say just get over it. I'm not telling you to get over it, but I am telling you to face it and look for healing and look for restoration from it. Don't ignore it. By ignoring it, it's never gonna go away. Some people get offended. I don't know why I'm going here. They get offended by the church, so they go to another church. The problem is they take their offense to that church too. They get divorced and they get immediately into another relationship, and they never dealt with the hurt of the previous relationship. So they take all that pain into a new relationship. Jesus said, really, you're gonna walk away? And 2,000 years later, it still happens. We confuse what we do for God with relationship with him. And so he turns around, now feeling a bit of abandonment, and he looks at the 12 and he goes, what about you? You guys going too? Maybe I could expect some of these 72 to go. I could see their heart. They were in it for the glory. They were in it so they could be part of something great, but they were never really in it because of me. What about you, 12? Are you leaving me too? And I love what now Peter, we know how Peter was, right? He said the dumbest things. You know, one moment, Jesus is saying, Peter, you are blessed because, flesh and blood didn't reveal to you that I was the Messiah, only the Father did. And Peter's like, yeah. And the very next moment, Jesus is calling him Satan. Get behind me, Satan. I mean, we know Peter. And when Jesus looks at the 12 and says, are you guys gonna leave me too? Peter goes, where are we going, Jesus? You have the words of life. No one can give to us what you've given to us. So yeah, we're gonna disappoint you. We're gonna get hurt. We're gonna get treated wrong, but we ain't going anywhere, man. We're ride or die. We're with you. And sure, they scattered one night after Jesus was arrested, but family, they were right there the next day, huddling in an upper room, waiting for him. Confused, but together. Hurt, but faithful. It's the faithful few. The faithful few. These are the people, family, and Pastor Larry and Pastora, you guys will know this. These are the people that after the hype and after the move, and the move is gone, there remains a remnant, a faithful few that you can always count on. That through the years, they're still there. The church divides, people leave, they're there. There's new everything, and they're like, all right, great. And when the newness wears out, we're still gonna be here. Because we serve him, not them. We serve him. There's that faithful group. Let me ask you this question. Are you part of the crowd? Are you part of the core? Are you part of the faithful few? Which group would you classify yourself with today? Are you here because it was just a good idea to come to church, which it is? But have you committed to Christ? Have you surrendered everything to him? Don't allow hurt to get the best of you. Don't allow offense or disappointment to sting you. Get healing from that. Are you part of that crowd? Or are you part of that core that you're hooked up? You're in a ministry. You're in a restore group. You're involved in a ministry, but you're not spending time with Jesus. You're part of something, but you're not spending time with him. So when you get hurt or offended, it's gonna be very tempting to walk away and then point the finger and say, that's why. Or are you part of the faithful, that you're still gonna get hurt? People are people, y'all. People are gonna fail us. But you're not gonna allow them to touch your relationship with Jesus. You're not gonna allow them to take away what Jesus has done. Somebody here needs to remember what God has done in their lives. Somebody here, you are ready to wreck everything, and the Lord is reminding you this morning of what he's done in your life. Don't take that step that you said you were gonna take after church. Because the Lord is reminding you what he took you from, what he got you out of, the new life that he's given to you. Don't waste it. And I love at the very end of Jesus' life, Jesus looks at those 12 disciples and he says this, you are those who have stayed with me in my trials, and I assign to you, as my Father assigned to me, a kingdom. He said, you 12, when everybody walked away, you guys stayed with me. And because you were faithful, I give to you the mandate that was given to me by my Father. Because everything that I received, I'm gonna give to you because you were faithful. Every blessing you want, everything you need in your life comes through faithfulness, family. You can be faithful. And I know I have to close, but family, make no mistake, God knows the condition of our heart. He knows the condition of your heart. Some of you come in here and you're hurting and he wants to heal that hurt. Some of you have come in and you're disappointed and he wants to heal that disappointment. Some of you, you've allowed pride to be a rock around your heart, and your heart is hard now, and he wants to break that hardness, and he wants to touch your heart. Some of you have been so fearful of the what if, and so you've hardened your heart as well, and God says, let me soften that. Because all of the blessing that you could ever need in your life comes by not what you can do for God. It comes by just being positioned as a son and a daughter. I need to remind you, don't follow your heart, follow God's heart. Don't follow your heart, follow God's heart. You carry gold inside of you. Holy Spirit is inside of you, and he's empowered you. His words are spirit and their life. Would you close your eyes today?